Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Hot Topics in Real Estate. I'm Rob Wachter with the Wachter Group in Jay Park, Carolina Living. And today we're going to take a slight departure from some of our normal topics where we often talk specifically about real estate topics. And I've got a special guest I'm really excited to introduce you to. But first, as always, I wanted to remind you that if you have any questions during this broadcast, please drop them in the comments. We will get to them at the end. If you are watching a recorded version of this, just do the same thing. Drop a comment in there. We will make sure that one of us gets the answer to you as quickly as possible. But we love interaction at the end of these broadcasts. So as most of you know, the Wachter Group is a team of seniors real estate specialists. That's one of our passions. We work with people that are 55 and up, and we help them in their downsizing, and we help families that are moving family members into retirement homes, assisted livings, et cetera. And often we run across businesses that have complementary services that they provide in that space. And when we do, we want to highlight them, and we want to make sure that you as the public knows that these services are out there. So not too long ago, I saw in a news clip a video of our guest, Jasmine Hathaway. She is the founder of Compass Coordinators, and she was talking about a service that she provides to families, specifically families that have gone through loss. That was profoundly interesting to me. And I know will have a great impact on many of the clients and the families that we work with. So I wanted her to come on this show and tell you about Compass Coordinators and get the word out. So Jasmine, thanks so much for joining us today. Really can't wait to hear about what Compass Coordinators is.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here. And today I have a little slideshow for everybody. The topic is learn from my mistakes, 3 essential steps in estate planning. So we're going to be talking about my personal experience and also a little bit about what I do with Compass Coordinators. And hopefully it'll be some really helpful information for everybody.
Great. Looking forward to it.
All right. So let's see. So I'm going to start out with a little bit of introduction. So I am Jasmine Hathaway, as Rob mentioned. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina with my husband, Luke, and we have a 7-year-old daughter, Alex. Up until I founded Compass Coordinators, my career was mostly in marketing, operations, and leadership roles in everything from startups to a Fortune 100 company. But I've been through a lot outside of work that's really shaped who I am today. So in 2012, I married my first husband, Alan, and I was 8 months pregnant when Alan was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So that was a lot for both of us to deal with, but honestly, my husband, Alan, he never really faced the reality that he wasn't going to be with us forever. And I just let it be, honestly, because who wants to badger their husband while they're going through chemo, right? But that ended up making it so much harder after he was gone. And I had no idea what was to come. Because we never talked about it, there were utilities in his name that were in danger of getting cut off when he died. There were so many accounts I didn't have the slightest idea of how to access. And at one point, I got so frustrated that I threw a perfectly good tablet away, just threw it in the trash because I could not deal with it. So it really doesn't have to be that way. So when someone dies, it is often overwhelming and confusing to try to figure out what needs to be done. When the person leaves, no will and no information, it is even worse. Grief can make it hard to focus or remember things, even for the most capable of people. And that definitely was my experience. It was really disorienting. So I started Compass Coordinators to help people understand what they need to do to avoid some of what I went through, both by planning in advance, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and providing concierge support after a loved one has died. So when things get overwhelming, Compass Coordinators can step in and help manage the bureaucracy, logistics, and tasks so clients have space to grieve. So I also recently won first prize in the National Daring to Disrupt contest for the business idea, which is amazing recognition of the need in this space. And that's how Rob saw me on the news. So before we move on, though, I do need to make it totally clear that I am not an attorney or a financial professional. So nothing I say should be construed as legal or financial advice. I would be happy to put you in touch with some great estate planning attorneys, financial advisors if you need it. So happy to do that if you want to reach out to me afterwards. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about me, what I do, I just wanted to go over a little bit about what to expect. I know I kind of started out with my story, it can be a little bit heavy, but we are not going to stay in heavy, kind of difficult land for very long. It's going to be helpful information, I promise. So really, if you're here, I'm guessing that you have some awareness that you or someone you love will die at some point. So I know that sounds kind of silly to say, but it's a fact that a lot of people would rather not think about. So it doesn't matter if you're young or old, married or single, whether you have dependents, kids, whatever, this is for everybody. So after my experience losing my husband, there really were these three main things that I wished I had done before he was gone that would have saved me so much time and stress. So obviously, there's no amount of preparation that can guarantee that you or your family won't run into some like unavoidable issues. But just by being here today, just by watching this, you are giving yourself and your family a great gift. So, and as Rob mentioned, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So as I go through some of this stuff, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to those definitely. Okay. So you might be thinking, what are those three things? So here they are. Super easy. Make a plan, have the conversation, and get organized. That's all. So I'm not going to be going into anything super technical or legalistic. As I mentioned, not a lawyer. But honestly, and while I wish that my husband had put his wishes in writing, including having a will, that's that attorney stepping in, as I mentioned, I really do think that just planning, talking to him about specific topics, and getting things together before he passed would have made a world of difference. So this really does not have to be super hard, intimidating, or scary. But it's something that a lot of people don't take the time to do. So let's dive in. Let's go to the first one.
And I think what's fascinating about that, Jasmine, is I've worked with many clients over the years that have spent lots of money on high-priced attorneys and exotic estate plans and never really told their loved ones where to find the documents or what it really meant to execute them. So I'm really excited to hear about this for just the basic family planning.
Yeah, I mean, you are so right. You can spend thousands of dollars getting all of your official documents in order, but if your family has no idea how to access them, the name of your attorney or the firm or any of that stuff, it doesn't really do them a whole lot of good in the moment when things are kind of cloudy and confusing anyways, right? So excellent point. I'm glad you said that. Okay, so the make a plan step of this three-step process. Okay, so what this refers to is just spending some time thinking about some hard questions. So that would be things like, what would you do if a family member passed away? Like, are you the executor to someone's estate? Like sometimes when people make their will, they don't always talk to the people that they've named in their will to make sure that they understand what that responsibility means, right? So if that is the case, if you would kind of be on the hook for some of this stuff, like would you know where to find the information about their life insurance policy, taxes, birth certificates? And because I'm here with Rob, there are lots and lots of things that are related to real estate that fall into this category too. So like some of the things about running your household that you may not even think about sharing with someone, like how to get your gas fireplace lit. Or, I mean, Rob, feel free to jump in. Another one that comes to mind is like the home alarm system. Like whose name is on that? Does anyone else have access to it? What else can you think of?
we've even seen clients and that have gone through, financial crises in the middle of this, not knowing that they had accounts or lines of credit or mortgages on the house, and not knowing that they needed to even pay some of these bills. It can be really devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot there, right? So when you think about these things, especially if there's someone in particular that you're thinking of and their situation, so think about how organized they may be in their daily life, right? So even if you don't know all the answers to those questions, are they the kind of person that likes to have a plan? So do they plan vacations? Do they plan this weekend or not? So I mean, that kind of tendency might give you some kind of clue that they do have some of that organized. But it's still important to kind of think about all right, of these things, what am I really worried about here, right? We'll talk about that in a little bit too. But the important thing is you are not making their plan for them, right? So this is your plan for what you want to talk about. It's just thinking about that person and the conversation that you may want to have with them, right? So maybe they have had part of this conversation with you, but there are some other things that come up. I mean, everybody's different, but if you are here because there's no one like that in your life, who you can think of that you need to have this conversation with, but you want to be the one to have a plan, that is great too. So in that case, this make a plan section, I mean, you have the power to do so much, right? You just thinking through these questions, and you can even take steps to meet with an estate attorney or a financial advisor to get your will and your accounts taken care of, organize your information, share it with your family, right? So that is just a really good starting place for those conversations if you begin by sharing what your own thoughts are on these topics as well. Okay, so next, all right, you might recognize this gorgeous bird here as an ostrich, right? And you might know that ostriches are famous for, Rob, do you know what they're
Burying their
famous for?
heads in the sand.
That's right, you got it. So when you take a look at this picture, does that look like anybody that you know? I think my mom has given me that look before. I don't know. I'm just kidding. So a lot of times we put our heads in the sand when we are asked to think about topics like end of life planning. So sometimes it's us doing the avoiding, but it's also just smart to expect some amount of awkwardness with your loved ones when you're talking about this kind of stuff. And honestly, our culture can be weirdly superstitious because we think that talking about dying is going to make it happen. And that is not the case, right?
There's
So
a lot of denial going on.
So much denial, yes. And I did a quick poll of the people who follow me on Instagram, and it was almost 90% of people who responded to this poll had no idea where their parents' important documents are. So even if our loved ones are organized, we are not talking to them about end of life planning because it's awkward, right? Okay, so all right, we were thinking about one person in particular where we may want to have some conversation with them, right? So for a lot of people, it's a parent or a spouse. You can think about what kind of worries you about their situation, like we were talking about. So maybe an easy one, it's that you think that they don't have a will, right? That's kind of a big one. Or maybe you know that they don't have a will. That's just something that they have not taken any steps to do. And they have dependents or a house or a business or 7 different 401k accounts from prior jobs. So all of those are huge red flags that without dealing with those things now, it's going to fall to you to deal with those later. So if you have a couple of different topics in mind, so there are 2 main considerations that I am going to ask you to take when you prioritize where you want to start with those. So the first one is, how important is it? So will, very important. Other things may not be as important, like maybe information about how they run their household that you could probably figure out on your own, if they always use your birth date as their password, which is not safe. That would be maybe like a lower priority to discuss, right? So you know them best, so you kind of have to just give it some thought before diving in. But that's the plan piece of this. Okay, so now that you have your plan, it's time to have the conversation. So I actually put an S on the end of the word there because it is unlikely that you will be able to cover everything in one conversation and be done. Unless there's some kind of pressing deadline, you do not need to talk about everything in one sitting. So expect to kind of like spread it out over some weeks and months. And that also might help kind of ease some of the worry and anxiety and awkwardness that may come with these conversations. So the other thing that I have here is I highly recommend documenting the conversations. So especially if you're discussing specifics with your person, like important contacts, the locations of important information, in particular, if you have other family members who will want to know about what was discussed, that you can take notes or use your phone to record either audio or video of the conversation. That's super important for later, especially if emotions get kind of high. People just remember things differently, and having that documentation can make it really, really helpful. Okay, so the last thing, the last of the three simple things is get organized. Okay, so if you've documented your conversation, this refers to putting that information in a place that is secure but easily accessed by the people who need it. This will also help you keep track of what topics have been addressed and which things you still need to take care of. Your conversations may lead to some additional work, like doing research on password managers, making appointments to get that will from 1986 updated, or like tracking down military service records. All of that stuff is really important and can take some time. So you'll want to keep track of all of that. So the last part of getting organized is addressing your physical documents and your digital estate. So Rob, do you know what digital estate refers to?
I believe it's everything from social media to online banking tools, things like that. But tell me if I'm correct.
No, you are absolutely correct. Yeah. So a lot of us live our lives online, right? And it's impossible to know without some kind of documentation what all accounts you have out there. So, I mean, in our case, if we're thinking about someone else trying to access their accounts, I mean, I wouldn't have the slightest idea of how to track down all the accounts that my husband has, for example, without some kind of system in place. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking about email, document storage, photos, so like iCloud and all that stuff. Like, you don't have access to that unless they give it to you, right? So that stuff is really, really important. I can talk about that all day long, but
when people don't realize just how common that is, banking was my first career, and even to this day, the number of accounts that are transferred to the state because they're abandoned property or unclaimed property it's unbelievable how much money the state is holding, just waiting for people to remember they had it or find some sort of record.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of times that's the kind of thing that just gets so overwhelming if you just don't know where to start, that people just give up on it, and that they're literally leaving money on the table, right? Absolutely. So okay, so the physical document organization. All right, so I run into a couple of funny examples of things that like do not count as good physical document organization. So that would be like when you cram all your bills into a desk drawer. Like, that's not good. So your birth certificate being hidden in a family Bible, not great. That's not secure, right? So, and it also, if you are one of these people that has file cabinets containing every piece of mail that you've gotten, like in your life, right? They're just crammed full of stuff. That is so hard for family to sort through after the fact. So I have a picture here of one of my document organizers. So it is not big, right? It's only the key pieces of information. And it's just a little like plastic accordion folder kind of thing that I got from Target. So anybody can get one of these. But it's got my wills, social security cards, passports, birth certificates, marriage certificate, all in that one tabbed folder. So it all stays together in a secure, undisclosed location, right? So for all of that online stuff, the digital estate, I highly recommend using a password manager like Keeper, Log Me Once, or LastPass. I'm not going to get into kind of the pros and cons of each one, but they also, a lot of them have this feature where they can allow emergency access to specific people that you choose. So definitely do a little Google searching, a little bit of research, and reading some reviews to decide which one is best for you there.
Yeah, I actually speak on this in some of the fraud prevention type of talks that I do. And I really encourage people to use resources like the Better Business Bureau, bbb.com, or AARP, or potentially Consumer Reports, unbiased companies that do extensive research on which of these programs that you use, because it is so important to have a password manager or some security suites.
Yes, yes. Thank you for saying that. Absolutely. Okay, so this slide that I have up here, we've made it through the three big things. So now we're into kind of like the practical tools you can use side of things. So this slide is a relatively new category of things that you could use. This is online platforms for end of life planning. So these are the three kind of biggest in that space. Their names are Cake, Everplans, and Lantern. So these are not substitutes for working with an attorney, but they can be helpful if you just really have no idea where to start and you want kind of a guided checklist to go through that's not just like a PDF that is completely overwhelming. They sort of take you step by step through the things that you should think about. And I believe Cake is free, and the other two have annual fees to store your information. So definitely, if that's something that you're interested in, those could be good options. But if you're more of a book person, like me, so these are the two that I recommend. So Get It Together is a book by Nolo, which is kind of known for do-it-yourself legal guides. It is good, it's comprehensive, but pretty dry. And the other one is In Case You Get Hit by a Bus. That's written by the founders of Everplans, one of the tools I mentioned on the last slide. So this one's kind of funny, like a lot of the blog posts on the Everplans website. It includes just personal stories from different people so you understand why each part is important. So that kind of helps connect the dots for me, which I really enjoyed. And if this one, if you buy that one instead of getting it from the library, the purchase copy comes with a free year of Everplans. All right, so the final tool you can use is this conversation guide from Compass Coordinators. So this is something that I use. My parents actually used it to organize their own documents. And I'm going to give this to you for free if you want it. So this is something that you can use to facilitate those conversations with your loved ones and keep track of those documents and what you've talked about. So you can sort of use it as like a cover page on a binder or folder and include all your important information behind it. But don't forget to lock that in a safe or other kind of secure place. Mm-hmm. So all you have to do if you want this is email me at jasmine@compasscoordinators.com with the subject line conversation guide, and I'll send it to you. No subscription to a newsletter or anything unless you want that. I'll just send you this document. All right, and that's it. So thank you so much again, Rob, and the audience for listening to me today. So I'm just going to close with the thought that, ostriches and people are a lot happier with our heads out of the sand, right? So, and then I have some information to stay engaged with us if you want. Now we have some time for Q&A.
Great. Jasmine, thank you so much for sharing that. This is one of those topics that I don't think people know that there are even resources available to help them with. And, it's interesting, the book, what if you get hit by a bus? I've actually found that as a much more comfortable way to break the ice in my family. So people don't want to think about what happens when they get old, sick, and die, but they have to remember, oh yeah, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And it somehow suddenly makes it less fearful, less about their own mortality and their lifestyle, and more about, fate. So I think that's fantastic. Do you have any tips on how to start a conversation with a family member that may be a little reticent to kind of go down this road?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do is just to start small and specific, right? So don't try to spring it on them like, hey, I want to have an end of life conversation. It's much easier and more likely to go well if you start out by asking them like, hey, I was thinking about what I should do with my passwords and what someone would do if I got hit by a bus. And this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Have you thought about these things? And start there. And like I said, it doesn't have to be all at once. You just kind of break it up, take it a little bit at a time, and sort of at their pace. So if they're really freaked out and now is not a good time for this or whatever, then you can pick it up again later. But yeah, it's all about making it kind of easy to swallow in the beginning and not sort of, immediately starting in with hey, I have my entire end of life plan here, or what is your end of life plan? Or, those kinds of things can really shut people down pretty quickly.
Now, if someone does go down that road and they find that it doesn't go well, what's the best way to try to fix that?
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, it is so dependent on your personal relationship and your interactions. You really know your family best, but if it doesn't go well, that could be a sign that you do want to take a step and have a neutral third party involved. So maybe getting an attorney, an estate planning attorney involved earlier rather than later. In my recommendation, I think a lot of these things can be talked about without an attorney present if you're able to have that conversation. But if you do need to have someone else in the room to kind of expertly walk through one thing at a time in a little bit of a different manner than you can have because of your relationship with your loved one, then that could be something that helps.
Okay. Great. And at what point in the process do you think families should be reaching out to an attorney?
Yeah, so like I said, it really is dependent on how much you have done, discussed. At what point do you want to get an attorney involved? If you're using a platform like Cake or Lantern or whatever, the way you know that you need an attorney is if you can't make any more progress on your own, and or you get to something that absolutely needs an attorney, like a will, a power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, advance directive. All of those things, in order to be sort of official, need an attorney's involvement.
Mm-hmm. I feel like what you do is absolutely not a replacement for legal advice, but a really good parallel and support from the family side to make sure they're having the right conversations with these attorneys and at the right times.
Yeah. And a lot of what I'm doing is kind of facilitating a little bit of those family conversations, and maybe even breaking down some of the barriers to having these conversations by saying, okay, you think you're good to go, but do you actually know where this information is? Do you actually have any idea what your loved one would want if they were to sort of get hit by a bus or, be in some kind of medical crisis or coma? Like, those are things that can be extremely disorienting, and just pretending like they won't ever happen,
Mhm.
that doesn't really work.
I understand. So if someone finds themselves in a situation where they haven't planned and they're in a crisis or have experienced a loss, do you have any tips or suggestions, or what would you recommend?
Yeah. Well, in a crisis, in kind of like a sudden loss situation, it's really important to give yourself some grace. That's the very first thing that I would say. Don't be too hard on yourself, and don't try to get everything exactly right all by yourself. And the other thing that I would say is ask for help and go to an expert, go to somebody who you can trust to walk you through this. Compass Coordinators is one resource of many that exist to kind of make sure that you have the space that you need to focus on your family, focus on what's important, and don't have to spend so much time in the kind of paperwork realm.
So you could be a resource both in the planning stage and in the management stage.
Yep, exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us today. And I hope that if you're watching this on a recording and you put a question or comment in there, we'll get back to you. Again, working with so many senior citizens in our practice, it is amazing me every day how we find other things that are available and people that have found niches that we didn't really know existed before now. So my mission is to bring as many of these services to light and catalog them on our website and make sure that we spread the word. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that that your business prospers, and we hope we can support that. And for the audience, we thank you for watching and participating, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.